It used to be said that if England was the birthplace of football, then Brazil was the sport's spiritual and adopted home. And certainly, the continents of Europe and South America have dominated the footballing landscape over the last 100 years. No nation from outside of those two continents has ever won the World Cup, or even reached the final, with South Korea and the United States the only two non-UEFA or CONMEBOL national teams to have even reached the semi-finals, in 1930 and 2002 respectively. However, that narrative only tells half the story. When Uruguay won the inaugural FIFA World Cup in 1930, their star man and the best player in world football, Jose Andrade, was the son of an African-born slave who had been transported to Brazil and escaped to Uruguay. At the most recent World Cup, 2 of France's 23-man squad were born in Africa, and over half of their squad, 14 players, had at least one parent from the continent. There are other similar examples littered throughout the history of the World Cup and almost all major tournaments, which dispel any notions that Europe or South America have some kind of monopoly on footballing talent. In a similar vein, I thought I'd take a look at some of the best players right now who don't represent UEFA or CONMEBOL national teams. So that is what I mean by outside of Europe and South America for the purposes of today's video. If you required any further evidence that Europe and South America haven't monopolised world football's finest talent, I suspect this video will provide the necessary tonic, since it was extraordinarily competitive and you could create a phenomenal 11 purely out of the players who couldn't even make the bench. Without further ado then, here is my best 11 from outside of Europe and South America. Goalkeeper: Keylor Navas. There are a couple of excellent African goalkeepers out there at the moment who I will come to with my bench and honourable mentions, but eclipsing them both is Costa Rican legend Keylor Navas. An agile and alert goalkeeper who enjoyed a rapid rise within the Spanish game in the early to mid 2010s, Navas is now surely the greatest Costa Rican footballer of all time. One could argue that Paulo Wanchope did more for the national team, but in the club game there is no comparison. A 3-time Champions League winner in successive seasons at Real Madrid, Navas now stars for Paris Saint-Germain, aged 34, and he was a pretty safe inclusion, if truth be told. Right back: Achraf Hakimi. You know you're a loser when you get excited about the quality of an inclusion in a random fantasy 11 that you've just decided to make, which you call your job, that will never actually play a game together. But I am more than happy to admit that I am just that loser. Achraf Hakimi is a sensational right back with searing pace, bountiful enthusiasm, and a terrific right foot when it comes to putting balls into the box. Capable of becoming the best right back in the world, I must admit I was a bit surprised that Real Madrid didn't insert a buyback clause into his deal to join Inter Milan, but presumably the Italians would have refused to sign off on the deal had such a clause been inserted. Hakimi was actually born in Madrid, but both of his parents are Moroccan, and the 22-year-old has already won 34 caps for Morocco, putting him well on course to become the nation's most capped player of all time by his early 30s. Centre-back: Kalidou Koulibaly. The rock at the heart of what I must say is an excellent backline, Kalidou Koulibaly is arguably the finest defender in world football right now from outside of Europe and South America. Like Hakimi, Koulibaly was actually born in Europe, in France in his case, to 2 Senegalese parents. Koulibaly's father worked 7 days a week in a textile mill without a single day off for 5 years, away from his family in France until he earned enough money to bring them over from Senegal. Whilst Koulibaly will hopefully never have to make such extraordinary sacrifices for his family, he has inherited some of his father's remarkable work ethic, becoming an uncompromising man-mountain of a centre-back. Capped 45 times by Senegal, the former Metz and Genk star has been with Napoli since 2014, where he has become one of the most highly regarded centre-backs in Europe, routinely linked with big money moves elsewhere. Centre-back: Joel Matip. Whilst Kalidou Koulibaly's spot in this 11 was never in any doubt, who partnered him at centre-back was a much trickier decision. I'll come to those who could have featured there in just a minute, but in the end I went with Joel Matip. It's often said how easy it must be to play alongside Virgil van Dijk, but I think that does Joel Matip a bit of a disservice. He has routinely done a fine job for Liverpool when fit, particularly in the 2018-19 season when the Reds won the Champions League and won 97 points in the Premier League. The only problem for Matip, which I just alluded to, is that he very often is not fully fit. Injuries have limited him to just 25 appearances in the last 18 months, and it's for that reason that he very nearly missed out, despite often impressing when he isn't hamstrung by a knee injury or the current injury to his ankle, which has ruled him out since January. Again, Matip was actually born in Europe, in Bochum, Germany, but he followed in the footsteps of his father by representing Cameroon up until 2015. Left back, Alphonso Davies. Like a number of players in this 11, Alphonso Davies represents a different national team to the nation of his birth, but unlike most, neither of those countries are based in Europe or South America. Davies was born in a refugee camp in Ghana to Liberian parents fleeing the Second Liberian Civil War, and it wasn't until he was 5 years old that the family relocated to Canada. Theoretically, Davies could have represented Ghana, Liberia, or Canada, but he has been a part of the Canadian setup since under 17 level. Now aged 20, Davies has won 19 caps for Canada's senior team and looks capable of becoming the greatest Canadian player of all time. A star on the left wing for Vancouver Whitecaps, it is at left back that Davies has flourished at Bayern Munich, enjoying a pretty spectacular 2019-20 campaign. Defensive midfield, Wilfred Ndidi. Competition for places was so fierce in holding and central midfield, but there is simply no way that I could leave Wilfred Ndidi out. Pivotal to Leicester City when fit, the tireless ball-winning midfielder has made 165 appearances for the Foxes and 248 appearances in the professional game all told, aged only 24. That is some going, and with 38 caps to his name, becoming Nigeria's most capped player of all time certainly isn't beyond him. Ndidi was born in Nigeria's largest city of Lagos, and he won his first cap at the age of only 18. Consistently excellent for the last 5 seasons, Ndidi's defensive work in particular is outstanding, and he is comfortably among the best defence midfielders in the Premier League. Central midfield, Franck Kessié. Playing in a sort of 6-8 defensive / box-to-box role, just as he does for AC Milan, again, in spite of stiff competition, with this season in mind, there is simply no way that I could leave out Franck Kessié. The son of a footballer turned soldier who sadly died when Kessié was only 11 years old, Ndidi and Kessié were actually born just 3 days apart. Kessié has won even more caps for Ivory Coast than Ndidi has for Nigeria, with 46 caps to his name, his first having come when he was just 17. A terrific midfield enforcer who has chipped in with 16 goals for club and country this season, alongside Ndidi, this midfield would have endless energy and destructiveness, which gave me the license to play a very attacking front four, which we will come to now. Right wing, Riyad Mahrez. Another man who tragically lost his father very young, aged only 15, Riyad Mahrez was born in the suburbs of Paris to Algerian parents. He could have represented Algeria, Morocco or France, but at the age in which he chose to represent Algeria, a France cap would have seemed like a pipe dream. That is not the case now, with Mahrez having enjoyed a meteoric rise with Leicester City, culminating in a £60 million move to Manchester City. Arguably worth every penny, Mahrez recently turned 30, and he is without doubt one of the most skillful, inventive, and most importantly of all, productive wide players in the entire world. So, even with the sternest of competition, if any position in this 11, he simply has to start. Attacking midfield, Son Heung-min. There are 5 continents outside of Europe and South America, namely Africa, Asia, North America, Australia, which is sometimes incorrectly referred to as Australasia, and Antarctica. As of yet, Africa has dominated our 11, and only Africa and North America have any representation at all. That all changes in attacking midfield, where I have selected South Korea's finest, Son Heung-min. Used to playing primarily on the left flank at Tottenham, Son is such a gifted and intelligent footballer that I have little doubt he could operate in the number 10 position in this 11 with great success. A phenomenal footballer who made his name in Europe in the Bundesliga, Son has gone from strength to strength at Tottenham, becoming one of the best players in the Premier League. As far as I'm concerned, he is already the greatest South Korean footballer of all time, and the greatest Asian footballer of the last century, which isn't bad going for a 28-year-old. So I had to find a place for him, even if it is slightly out of position. Left wing, Sadio Mane. My initial draft of this 11 had Son Heung-min on the left flank, And it was the difficulty that I had in splitting Son and Mane that eventually convinced me to just play Son through the middle so that I could pick them both. In truth, all of our front four are fairly flexible and interchangeable, and Mane is no exception. Born into poverty in a small town in Senegal, Mane made his name with Metz in Ligue 2, where he actually suffered relegation to France's third tier, before moves to Red Bull Salzburg and Southampton. Among Liverpool's brightest lights since 2016, Mane has scored 93 goals in 210 games at Anfield, where his industry, intelligence and end product have made him one of the most impressive and effective players in the division. Centre forward, Mohamed Salah. I'll level with you, there were about 6 or 7 wide players that I was having great difficulty narrowing down to only 2, so in the end, I just picked 4 of them. With that being said, I wouldn't have done that if I didn't think it made for the best possible 11 from the available pool of players, and I think Son Heung-min and Mohamed Salah are more than capable of playing where I've put them. Of course, Salah is primarily a right-sided forward, renowned for his prolific goal-scoring record, often when cutting back inside onto his favoured left foot. This season, Salah has started 4 games playing through the middle, scoring 3 goals. And it's a position he has played on a number of occasions in the past, so I don't think he'd have any problems scoring goals in this side. As I said, it is a flexible front four, so at times he would likely drift out wide, Son would pick up a more advanced role running beyond him, and, well, I'm doing that thing where I imagine that this is all real again, aren't I? Anyhow, Salah has already scored 28 goals for Liverpool in a fairly turgid campaign by the Reds' recent standards, so whatever position it was in, you know he had to start. Waiting in the wings on my 7-man bench, we start with Edouard Mendy, yet another French-born Senegalese international who has impressed since signing for Chelsea. He is joined by Togo-style man Djené Darkonum of Getafe and recently declared Ivorian international Willy Boly of Wolverhampton Wanderers, both of whom are primarily centre-backs, but Darkonum can at least cover at fullback. In midfield, Thomas Partey can consider himself very unfortunate to have missed out on a starting berth. But his injury-disrupted slow start to life at Arsenal just cost him, meanwhile Ndidi and Kessié have both been outstanding this season. Partey was born and raised in Ghana, only moving to Madrid at the age of 19, when he signed for Atletico in 2012. The 3 forwards waiting in the wings who could form an outstanding front 3 all of their own are American wide man Christian Pulisic, prolific Gabonese legend Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and Mexico number 9 Raul Jimenez. Pulisic hit a tremendous purple patch of form towards the back end of last season at Chelsea and looks like one hell of a player, but has been disrupted by injuries ever since that FA Cup final defeat in which he scored against Arsenal. Aubameyang would probably have had to start in this 11 had it been made at just about any other time over the last 5 or 6 years, but a slight wobble at Arsenal sees him miss out. Meanwhile, Raul Jimenez is another man currently out of action, having fractured his skull at the end of November, and now entering his final rehabilitation stage of training ahead of his return. It's all too easy to forget that Jimenez bagged 27 goals last season and has been tremendous ever since he signed for Wolves, but I just couldn't quite face leaving out Mahrez or Salah. In terms of those who missed out, honourable mentions from Africa go to the likes of Andre Onana, Eric Bailly, Nicola Pepe, Mehdi Benatia, Naby Keita, Wilfried Zaha, Victor Osimhen, Hakim Ziyech, Idrissa Gueye, and Yves Bissouma. From North America, the likes of Jesus Corona, Hirving Lozano, Leon Bailey, Weston McKennie, Hector Herrera, and Carlos Vela all deserve some recognition. From Asia, there is perhaps slightly less competition, but you still have Takumi Minamino, Hwang Hee-chan, and Omar Al-Sommer. In the continent of Australia, it is essentially just the big names from the Socceroos and the All Whites, which includes the likes of Chris Wood, Aaron Moy, and Tom Rogic. And obviously, lastly, there is Antarctica, whose players don't feature since you cannot compare humans to chinstrap penguins. It is simply not fair, and no players from any other continents would have featured had I included them. In charge of the team, just for the hell of it, I'm going to give it to Ignacio Ambriz, though solely on the assumption that Turkmen legend Kurban Berdiev is now retired at the age of 68, having been without a club since 2019. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all as ever for watching. Please do hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and of course have notifications turned on by hitting the little bell icon for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens should you wish to do so.